She's perfect for it, the man said softly behind the door. Educated. Elegant. She trusts me completely. Zuri Omari stopped in the corridor outside the private suite, the city of Seoul glowing through the glass at the end of the hall. Her hand hovered near the door handle, the engagement ring on her finger catching the light like evidence of a crime she hadn't known she was part of. In that quiet moment, she understood everything. The love, the future, the promises had never been real. And she walked away without making a sound. What Zuri didn't know yet was that walking away that night didn't end her story. The hotel suite overlooked Gangnam, glass walls framing Seoul's night pulse in gold and neon. Zuri stood near those windows, champagne untouched in her hand, watching her reflection more than the city. The engagement party hummed behind her, colleagues from the firm, Ethan's business associates, people whose names she'd memorized because that was what you did when you were about to become someone's wife. She'd worn ivory. Ethan had requested it. Something elegant, he'd said. Something that photographs well. The fabric felt expensive against her skin. Everything about tonight felt expensive. Curated. Perfect. She should have known perfection required rehearsal. 18 months of setup for what, 100,000? The voice drifted from the hallway adjacent to the balcony, male and familiar in a way that made her stomach tighten before her mind caught up. She didn't move toward it, didn't move away, just stood very still, the way prey does when it hasn't yet decided whether it's been seen. Blake, you're a sick bastard. Different voice. Amused. The engagement ring alone cost more than that. Investment. Ethan's laugh. She knew that laugh. Had heard it across dinner tables, in bed, through phone calls from London and Singapore and Tokyo. Her network's worth millions. Once we're married, I'll have access to every legal channel she's built in East Asia. Then the divorce, irreconcilable differences, keep it clean, and I walk with half her consulting contracts and all her client relationships. Marcus already has 3 firms interested in buying the list. And she has no idea? Zuri? God, no. She thinks this is a love story. She actually teared up when I proposed. His voice carried that particular texture of a man who found his own cleverness delicious. Beautiful woman. Brilliant even. But she has this naive thing about trust. Makes her easy. The champagne glass was cold in her palm. She noticed that. Noticed the way condensation had begun to slip down the crystal, dampening her fingers. Noticed the exact pattern of the city lights reflected in the window. Noticed everything except how to move, how to breathe, how to unknow what she now knew. The humiliation's the best part, Ethan continued. Can you imagine? International legal consultant, all that dignity, finding out her engagement was a business acquisition. Bradley's already planning to leak it to the legal blogs once we're done. She'll be a cautionary tale. The other man said something Zuri couldn't hear over the sudden rush of blood in her ears. Then laughter. Both of them, laughing. She set the champagne down on the nearest surface, a console table, black lacquer, very expensive, and walked toward the exit. Not the main door where the party continued. The service entrance. Her heels made no sound on the marble. She'd trained herself to move quietly through rooms full of powerful men. It was a skill that served her now. The hallway was empty. White walls, recessed lighting, the kind of corporate silence that costs money to maintain. She found the elevator, pressed the button, waited. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. Everything inside felt like broken glass, but her hands remained perfectly steady. The elevator arrived. She stepped in, pressed the lobby button, watched the numbers descend. 42, 41, 40. At 37, something in her chest cracked. Not audibly, not in any way that would show on her face. But she felt it, a hairline fracture in whatever structure had been holding her upright. By the time she reached the lobby, she'd already decided not to cry. She didn't go home. Home was the penthouse she'd moved into 6 months ago, the one Ethan had insisted they share. Why pay for 2 places? he'd said, smiling that smile she'd thought was love. Now she understood it had been math. Instead, she walked. Seoul, at night, was a different animal than Seoul in daylight. Darker, sharper, more honest. She let it swallow her. Turned down streets she didn't know, past restaurants closing and bars opening, through neighborhoods where the signs were all in Korean and her foreignness felt like armor instead of exposure. Her phone buzzed. Ethan. Then again. Then a call she didn't answer. By the 10th message, she powered it off. She ended up in Itaewon, in a bar that was too dim and too quiet for the district's usual energy. The kind of place where people came to not be found. She ordered whiskey because champagne now felt like a betrayal of taste, and sat at the end of the bar where the wood was worn smooth by years of other people's bad nights. The bartender didn't ask questions. Just poured, slid the glass across, moved away. Zuri was grateful for that. For the lack of curiosity. For being allowed to exist without explanation. She was halfway through her second drink when she felt it, the shift in air that announced presence. Someone had taken the seat 3 down from hers. She didn't look. Didn't need to. The bar had been empty. Now it wasn't. You're sitting in the dark, the man said after a moment. Korean, but his accent suggested education abroad. Intentionally or coincidentally? Zuri turned her head just enough to see him peripherally. Dark suit, expensive but understated. Face that would photograph well in profile, clean lines, serious mouth. He wasn't looking at her. Was looking at his own drink, something clear in a short glass. Intentionally, she said. Good. People who end up in dark corners by accident are usually lost. People who choose them know exactly where they are. She shouldn't engage. Should finish her drink, pay, leave. Return to whatever remained of her life and begin the work of dismantling a future that had never been real. But something about his voice, the way it didn't push or probe, made her stay. And you, she asked. Intentional or coincidental? I own the bar. That made her look at him fully. He was younger than his voice suggested, early 30s perhaps, with a kind of stillness that came from discipline rather than ease. His eyes, when he met hers, were very dark and very direct. Then you choose dark corners professionally, she said. I provide them. There's a difference. He lifted his glass slightly, not quite a toast. Kang Ji-Hoon. Zuri Omari. I know. Those 2 words should have alarmed her. Instead, they landed with the inevitability of something that had always been coming. She waited. You consult for Min and Associates, Ji-Hoon continued. International contract law, specializing in cross-border corporate disputes. You've been in Seoul for 3 years. Your engagement party is happening right now in a hotel approximately 4 kilometers from here. He paused. You left. Zuri's fingers tightened around her glass. You have me investigated or you're guessing? Neither. I pay attention to people who matter in this city. He turned to face her fully now, and she understood suddenly that this was a man who rarely gave anyone his complete attention. And you matter. Not because of Ethan Blake, he's a minor player pretending at significance. Because of what you've built yourself. The bartender materialized, refilled her glass without asking, vanished again. Why are you telling me this? Zuri asked. Because you're sitting in my bar at 11:30 on what should be the happiest night of your life, drinking whiskey like it's medicine. His voice was matter-of-fact, not sympathetic. She preferred that. Which means you learned something tonight. And when people like you learn the wrong things about people like Blake, I get interested. People like me. Smart. Self-made. Careful. He paused. Easy to underestimate if you're the kind of man who thinks beauty is the same as weakness. Something in Zuri's chest, the thing that had cracked in the elevator, shifted. Not healing, but settling into a new configuration. She studied Ji-Hoon more carefully now, reading the details she'd missed, the way other patrons gave his end of the bar unconscious distance, how the staff moved around him with practiced deference, the quality of his watch that suggested wealth, but the plainness of it that suggested power. "What do you want?" she asked.
To propose something.
He finished his drink, set it down with precision. "But not here. Not tonight. You need time to decide what comes next. Whether you'll return to that hotel, to that man, to that performance. Or whether you'll choose something different. Different.
More honest.
More useful. More yours." He stood, and she realized he was taller than she'd estimated, tall enough that her heels wouldn't close the distance. "I'll be at Namsan Tower tomorrow night. 7 o'clock. The observatory level. If you come, we'll talk. If you don't, you'll never see me again." He placed cash on the bar, too much for one drink, she noticed, and started toward the exit. "And if I go to the police?" Zuri said to his back. Ji-Hoon stopped. Didn't turn. "And tell them what?" "That a bar owner invited you to a public landmark for conversation." Now he did turn, and his expression was something that might have been amusement on a face that permitted such things. "You won't go to the police, Zuri Omari. You're going to go home, pack what matters, and spend tomorrow deciding whether you want revenge or recovery." He tilted his head slightly. "The bar is open if you need to think. Stay as long as you want." Then he was gone, and she was alone again except for the bartender who appeared only to refill glasses and the weight of a decision she hadn't known she'd been waiting to make. She stayed until 3 in the morning, drinking slowly, thinking clearly. By the time she left, she'd decided 3 things. She would never speak to Ethan Blake again. She would go to Namsan Tower. And whatever Kang Ji-Hoon wanted to propose, she would at least hear him out. Because the man who'd humiliated her had been right about one thing, she did have a naive thing about trust. But naive wasn't the same as stupid. And she was done being easy. Namsan Tower stood against the twilight like a needle threading sky and city together. Zuri arrived at 6:50, which was 10 minutes earlier than necessary, but exactly on time for someone who'd spent the day weighing the intelligence of meeting a stranger who somehow knew the architecture of her life. She'd packed. Ji-Hoon had been right about that. 2 suitcases, everything that mattered, which turned out to be less than she'd accumulated and more than she'd expected. Documents, clothes, her mother's jewelry, books she'd carried across 3 continents. She'd left the engagement ring on the kitchen counter. No note, no explanation. Ethan had called 43 times. She'd blocked the number at call 17. The observatory level was tourist empty, that strange pocket of time between day visitors and night crowds. She found Ji-Hoon at the north-facing window, backlit by Seoul's emerging lights. He wore different clothes, dark slacks, white shirt, no jacket, but the same quality of stillness. "You came," he said without turning. "You knew I would." "Suspected. There's a difference." Now he looked at her, his gaze moving over her face with the precision of someone reading a document. "You packed. Left. Cut contact. You're well informed. I'm interested. Also different." He gestured to the windows. "Do you know why I chose here? Public. Safe. Witnesses if you're planning something criminal. Smart. But no." He moved closer to the glass, and she followed, maintaining distance. "I chose here because this is what I'm offering you. Elevation. Perspective. The ability to see everything below you clearly."
He paused.
"And the option to leave whenever you want. All the exits are marked." Zuri studied the city below them, lights spreading like spilled gold. From this height, you couldn't see the street-level damage, the small cruelties, the way people moved through the dark hunting or hunted. Everything looked beautiful, planned, intentional. "What are you proposing?" she asked. "Marriage." She turned to face him fully. He wasn't smiling, wasn't doing anything except stating fact. "I need a wife," Ji-Hoon continued, his voice carrying no more weight than if he'd been ordering dinner. "Someone intelligent, established, foreign enough to bridge certain social gaps I'm required to navigate. Someone who won't ask questions about my business or demand emotional availability I can't provide."
He paused.
Someone who needs protection and legitimacy after a very public humiliation. You think I need protection? I think you'll need it when Blake realizes you're gone. Men like him don't accept loss quietly. They reframe it, turn the woman into the villain, themselves into the victim. His eyes were very steady. Your legal reputation will take damage. Clients will wonder if you're stable. If you can be trusted with sensitive information when you couldn't see your own engagement was fraud. Every word landed with the precision of someone who'd done research. Zuri felt anger rise. Hot, clean anger that felt better than the hollow ache that had lived in her chest since last night. And marriage to you prevents this how? Marriage to me reframes the narrative entirely. You didn't leave Blake because you were humiliated. You left because you met someone else. Someone powerful enough that Blake becomes irrelevant. He tilted his head slightly. Love at first sight. Whirlwind romance. Happens all the time in this city. Except it wouldn't be love.
No. It would be a contract.
18 months minimum. You keep your career, your autonomy, your name if you want. I ask nothing except your presence at necessary events and your discretion about my business. He paused. In exchange, you get my name, my protection, and the social capital that comes with being my wife, which in Seoul is considerable. Zuri processed this. The offer was clinical, transactional, completely insane, and strategically brilliant. What's your business? She asked. Import-export. Family operated. Very private. His tone suggested the conversation was closed on that topic. And if I refuse? Then you walk away. I'll have my driver take you wherever you need to go. We never see each other again. He met her eyes. But Blake will still come for your reputation. You'll still spend the next year rebuilding what he damages. And you'll do it alone. The city below them had grown darker, the lights brighter. Zuri thought about Ethan's laugh, about the way his friend had said, she thinks this is a love story, about the engagement ring she'd left behind and the career she'd spent 7 years building and the sudden fragility of everything she'd thought was solid. Why me? She asked finally. You could marry anyone. Someone Korean. Someone whose presence wouldn't raise questions. I could, but I need someone who won't fall in love with me.
His voice was very quiet now.
Someone who won't expect things I can't give. Someone smart enough to understand the boundaries and disciplined enough to maintain them. He paused. You loved Blake. Trusted him.
And he used that.
You won't make that mistake again. Which makes you perfect. It should have sounded cruel. Instead it sounded like someone who understood the exact shape of her damage. And if you fall in love with me? Zuri asked. Something flickered in Ji-Hoon's expression, amusement, maybe, or recognition. I won't. You're certain? I'm practical. Love is a liability in my world. I've spent 15 years avoiding it. I won't start now. Zuri looked back at the city, thought about contracts and marriages and the difference between choosing your cage and having one built around you without your knowledge. Thought about the way Ji-Hoon had said people who choose dark corners know exactly where they are. 18 months, she said. Minimum. We can extend if it's mutually beneficial. I keep my career, my clients, my autonomy. Yes. And you tell me nothing about your business. Correct. But I maintain plausible deniability about anything illegal. You'll never know enough to implicate. That's the point. She turned to face him. He was watching her with that same steady attention, no pressure, no persuasion. Just waiting. One night, Zuri said. We need to sell the whirlwind romance, which means we need a story about how we met. We met in a bar. You were leaving your engagement party. I was there. We talked. Not enough. No one believes love happens in one conversation. She paused, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. They need to believe we couldn't help ourselves, that it was inevitable. Ji-Hoon was quiet for a long moment. Then, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we do this properly. If we're going to lie, we lie well.
She met his eyes.
One night. Tonight. To establish the timeline. You want people to think we slept together. I want people to think we could not sleep together. The words came out steadier than she felt. The hotel where my engagement party was. You have a penthouse there. I have several properties. That's one. Then we go there. We're seen entering together. The night staff will talk, they always do. By tomorrow, Blake will hear that I left with someone else. That I didn't just run. I chose. Ji-Hoon studied her face. You understand what you're suggesting. I understand I'm tired of being the woman who didn't see it coming. I want to be the woman who made a choice. She lifted her chin slightly. Do you want a wife who knows how to commit to a performance or not? Silence stretched between them. Below, the city pulsed with its million private dramas. Somewhere down there, Ethan Blake was probably still calling her disconnected number, still rewriting the narrative to center himself. All right, Ji-Hoon said finally. But we establish rules first. What happens tonight is for appearance only. Nothing that makes you uncomfortable. Nothing that crosses lines we haven't explicitly agreed to. Agreed. And afterward, we don't discuss it. It becomes the story we tell, but not the truth we examine. Like the marriage itself. Exactly like the marriage itself. Zuri held out her hand. Business formal.
Contract ready.
Then we have an agreement. Ji-Hoon looked at her hand, then at her face, then back. When he took her hand, his grip was firm and warm and exactly the pressure of someone who understood how to hold something without breaking it. We have an agreement, he said. And that was how Zuri Omari became engaged for the second time in 48 hours. Except this time, she knew exactly what she was buying. The hotel suite was exactly as elegant as she'd expected and exactly as impersonal. Chrome and glass and that particular shade of gray that signaled expensive neutrality. Floor-to-ceiling windows.
A view.
A bed large enough to suggest luxury and small enough to suggest intimacy. Ji-Hoon moved through the space with the ease of someone who owned many places and was fully at home in none of them. He poured water, offered her the glass, took one for himself, remained standing. We should be seen on the balcony, he said. Close but not touching. Talking. The night manager will make rounds in approximately 15 minutes. Zuri set her water down. And then we stay here for 3 hours. In the morning, we're seen leaving together. You're wearing my jacket. I'm carrying your shoes.
He paused.
The story tells itself. Except we'll be doing what actually? Talking. Sleeping if you want. I have business calls to make, I'll take them in the study. You can use the bedroom. He gestured. There's a lock on the door if that makes you more comfortable. Something in Zuri's chest eased. She hadn't realized how tense she'd been until Ji-Hoon offered her the room with a lock, until he made it clear that performance ended where her comfort began. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded once, then moved to the balcony doors, opened them, stepped out. After a moment, she followed. Souls sprawled beneath them, closer now than from the tower, but still distant enough to feel separate. The air was cool. Spring turning to summer, that transitional temperature that required neither coat nor bare arms. She stood near the railing. Ji-Hoon stood a few feet away, angled toward her, but not crowding. Tell me something true, he said. She glanced at him. Why? Because we're about to spend 18 months pretending. I want to know one real thing before we start lying. Zuri considered this. Considered all the true things she could offer, and all the ones she wanted to keep. Finally, I loved him.
Ethan.
I actually loved him. And I hate that I did. Ji-Hoon was quiet. Then, that's not something to hate. That you loved him means you're capable of it. That he used it means he wasn't. Your turn, Zuri said. Tell me something true. He looked out at the city. I haven't wanted anything beyond survival and control in 10 years. This arrangement is the first time I've chosen something instead of just preventing loss. He paused. I don't know if that makes it smart or reckless. Both, probably. Probably. They stood in silence as the night manager made his rounds below, as city noise filtered up, as the moment stretched and settled. Not comfortable, exactly. But not entirely uncomfortable either. When they went back inside, Ji-Hoon showed her the bedroom. Clean, spare, the kind of space that suggested overnight stays but not residence. He gave her the lock code, told her to order room service if she wanted, said he'd wake her at 7 if she didn't wake first. Zuri locked the door, changed into clothes from the overnight bag she'd brought, lay in the expensive sheets in the dark and thought about the difference between being taken and taking, between falling and jumping, between love and choice. She didn't sleep, but she rested. And in the morning, when Ji-Hoon knocked gently and she emerged wearing his jacket that smelled like cedar and something else she couldn't name, when they walked through the lobby with her shoes in his hand and her hair deliberately mussed, when she saw the careful way staff didn't look at them directly but registered everything. In that moment, Zuri Omari understood she'd just declared war in the quietest possible way. And the man beside her, the one who'd offered elevation and exits in the same breath, was going to help her win it. The penthouse Ji-Hoon brought her to wasn't the hotel suite. It was his actual residence, a space in Hanam-dong that managed to be both austere and comfortable, like someone had carefully considered what living required and provided exactly that, nothing extra. You'll have the east wing, he said, setting her suitcases down in a bedroom that was twice the size of her old apartment. Private bath, office space, separate entrance if you need it. The main areas are shared kitchen, living room, the terrace. We should be seen together there when staff is present. You have staff. A housekeeper 3 times a week. A cook who prepares meals when requested. Both are discreet.
He paused at the doorway.
They know this is a marriage. They don't know the terms. And they won't ask. After he left, Zuri explored her new territory. The bedroom faced east like he'd said, morning light already warming the floor. Everything was expensive without being ostentatious. Good bones, good materials, no unnecessary decoration. A desk by the window. Closet space that seemed excessive until she remembered she was expected to live here for 18 months minimum. 18 months. She sat on the bed, firm mattress, quality linens, and let the reality settle. 2 days ago, she'd been engaged to a man planning to destroy her. Now she was married to a stranger who'd offered her an exit strategy that looked like a trap but felt like something else entirely. Her phone buzzed. New number. She'd gotten it yesterday, given the contact information only to her assistant and 3 key clients. The message was from Ji-Hoon, though they were in the same house. Meeting at 4. Family dinner tonight. You should be there. Formal. She typed back. Will they know the truth? His response came immediately. They'll know what they need to know. That you're my wife. That you're under my protection. That anyone who disrespects you answers to me. Zuri stared at that last line. Read it 3 times. Then dressed for a family dinner with people who would see through her if she wasn't careful, and who might protect her if she was. The dinner was in Bukshan, at a traditional hanok that had been in the Kang family for 4 generations. Ji-Hoon's driver delivered them in silence, and as they walked through the courtyard, he leaned close enough that she felt his breath against her ear. My uncle will test you. My aunt will seem warm, but she's evaluating everything. My cousin will try to make you uncomfortable because she enjoys it. His hand settled at the small of her back, light pressure, guiding. You don't need to win them. Just don't lose. Comforting.
Honest.
The family was exactly as he described, arranged around a low table in a room that smelled like wood and soy and generations of meals. Ji-Hoon made introductions in Korean, then English for her benefit. Uncle Min-suk, Aunt Hae-won, Cousin Ji-young. They studied her with the particular intensity of people whose approval actually mattered to them and who weren't accustomed to being surprised. So, Uncle Min-suk said in precise English, The international lawyer who left her fiancé. Zuri met his eyes. The international lawyer who met someone who made the choice obvious. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite approval, but close. The meal unfolded in courses, conversation moving between Korean and English depending on who was speaking. Zuri understood more Korean than she admitted, years of working in Seoul having given her functional comprehension even if her speaking was rough. She caught the edge of Aunt Haewon's comment to Ji-Hoon, "She's beautiful, but can she be trusted?" And Ji-Hoon's response, "She's here." That's trust enough. Young, the cousin, was more direct. "Your ex-fiancé is telling people you had a breakdown. That you're unstable." "He would," Zuri said calmly. Men who plan to profit from humiliation rarely accept responsibility when their targets walk away. "And marrying Ji-Hoon is your revenge." "Marrying Ji-Hoon is my choice. Revenge is just a pleasant side effect." Ji-Young laughed, genuine, surprised laughter that made the table's tension ease slightly. "I like her," she announced in Korean. Then to Zuri in English, "You'll need to be harder than you look. This family eats soft things." "Good thing I'm not soft." After dinner, Ji-Hoon walked her through the garden while his family presumably discussed her inside. Paper lanterns lit the path, and somewhere water ran over stones, that particular sound of expensive tranquility. "You did well," he said. "I told the truth. That made it easier." "You told the useful parts of the truth. That's different." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "They'll accept you. Min Suk respects intelligence. Haewon values dignity. And Ji-Young enjoys people who don't perform weakness." "And you?" Zuri asked. "What do you value?" He was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, follow through. "You said you'd do this. You're doing it. That matters more than charm." On the drive back to the penthouse, they sat in comfortable silence. Not the loaded quiet of strangers, but the settled quiet of people who'd agreed to terms and were now living inside them. Zuri found herself studying Ji-Hoon in profile, the clean line of his jaw, the way he held stillness like other people held tension, the strange sense that he was always thinking 3 moves ahead. "What?" he said without looking at her. "Nothing. Just noticing." "Noticing what?" "That you didn't tell them the arrangement has a time limit." Now he did look at her. "Would you have wanted me to?"
No.
"But I'm curious why you didn't. Because in my family, marriage isn't about love. It's about alliance, stability, the continuation of what we've built." His voice was matter-of-fact. An 18-month marriage serves those purposes as well as a permanent one. They don't need to know the difference. And when it ends, we'll say it didn't work. These things happen.
He paused.
Or we'll extend the contract if it's beneficial to both of us. Zuri looked out the window at Seoul passing by, the anonymous glow of it, the way the city held everyone's private arrangements without judgment. "Do you think we will extend it?" "I don't think about hypotheticals. I manage what's in front of me." Which wasn't an answer, but also was. The days developed rhythm. Zuri worked from the penthouse office, video calls with clients who asked carefully neutral questions about her sudden marriage and accepted her carefully neutral answers. Ji-Hoon left in the mornings, returned in the evenings, sometimes late, sometimes not at all. When he was there, they orbited each other with practiced distance, shared meals, brief conversations, the performance of cohabitation. But proximity has a way of creating intimacy even when neither party intends it. She learned he drank his coffee black and too hot, that he read financial papers in 2 languages, that he was left-handed except when using chopsticks. She learned he took calls from people whose names he never said, that he sometimes came home with blood on his knuckles that he never explained, that he had nightmares he never mentioned but that she heard through walls. He learned she worked best in the hours between midnight and 3 a.m., that she listened to jazz when she needed to think, that she kept her mother's photograph on her desk and touched its frame when calls went poorly. He learned she was fluent in French and functional in Mandarin, that she hated mint but loved ginger, that she cried silently in the shower and emerged composed. They learned each other like languages, not through study but through immersion. 3 weeks into the arrangement, Zuri came home from a client meeting to find Ji-Hoon in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, making something that smelled like garlic and sesame. "You cook," she said, surprised. "When necessary." He didn't look up from the vegetables he was cutting with the precision of someone who'd handled knives professionally. "You haven't eaten today." "How do you know?" "Your assistant called to confirm dinner plans. When you told her you didn't have any, she sounded concerned." He added greens to the pan. "So I'm making jjigae."
Sit.
Zuri sat, watched him move through the space with efficiency that bordered on meditation. The domesticity of it felt surreal. This man who presumably did terrible things for a living, who commanded fear by reputation, making her soup because her assistant was worried. When he set the bowl in front of her, steam rising, the smell of it brought tears to her eyes. Not from emotion, just from the sudden realization that this was the first time in weeks someone had fed her without wanting something in return. "Thank you," she said quietly. Ji-Hoon nodded once, made his own bowl, sat across from her. They ate in silence that felt less like distance and more like understanding. Later, as she lay in bed failing to sleep, Zuri thought about contracts and what they didn't cover. The agreement had specified 18 months, separate lives, performance when necessary. It hadn't specified what to do when performance started feeling like something else. When care crept in uninvited. When proximity became its own architecture, building something neither of them had planned. The charity gala was in Gangnam, at the same hotel where Zuri's engagement party had been 6 weeks and a lifetime ago. She dressed in black, Aunt Haewon's suggestion, delivered through Ji-Hoon, because black in this context meant expensive, untouchable, the kind of elegance that didn't apologize. Ji-Hoon wore a tuxedo that made him look like violence contained in good tailoring. When he helped her with her necklace, diamonds he'd insisted on buying, "Wives of mine were my jewelry," his fingers brushed her neck, and she felt the touch for longer than it lasted. "Ready?" he asked. Is anyone ever ready for their ex-fiancé's social humiliation attempt? His mouth did something that might have been a smile on a different face. "You're going to be fine, and I'll be beside you the entire time."
He was.
Through the entrance where photographers took pictures that would be in gossip columns by morning. Through the cocktail hour where Seoul's elite moved in their careful hierarchies. Through dinner where they were seated at a table with people who knew both Ethan and Ji-Hoon and were clearly hoping for drama. Ethan arrived late, exactly as he'd always done, timing his entrance for maximum impact. He had someone new on his arm. Young, blonde American. The replacement, Zuri thought distantly, and felt nothing except mild curiosity about whether this one knew what she was signing up for. Their eyes met across the room. Ethan's widened, surprise, then anger, then something uglier. He started toward their table. "Here we go," Ji-Hoon murmured. His hand found hers under the table, squeezed once. Not reassurance exactly. More like acknowledgement that they were about to perform. Ethan arrived with the energy of a man who'd rehearsed this moment.
Zuri.
How unexpected. She looked up slowly, as if noticing him for the first time. Let the pause extend just long enough to be uncomfortable.
"Ethan."
"You're late. As usual."
His jaw tightened.
"I see you've moved on. Quickly." "I see you have too." She glanced at his date, who was watching with the dawning realization that she'd been brought as a prop. "She's lovely. I hope you've been honest with her about your intentions." "My intentions were always honest. You were the one who ran away in the middle of our engagement party like a woman who'd learned her fiancé was committing fraud?" Zuri's voice remained perfectly level.
"Yes."
"That's exactly what I did." The table had gone silent. Everyone within earshot was now listening without pretending not to. Ethan's face reddened. "That's a serious accusation." "It's a fact." You were planning to marry me for access to my professional network and client list, then divorce me and sell that access to competitors. Your friend Marcus already had buyers lined up. She tilted her head slightly. Would you like me to continue? I have documentation. Recorded conversations. Written communications between you and several parties who were involved in the scheme. She didn't.
But he didn't know that.
Ethan stared at her, and she watched him recalculate in real time. Watched him realize that the naive woman he'd thought he was marrying had disappeared, replaced by someone who'd done her homework. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Am I? Zuri stood, and Ji-Hoon rose with her, his presence suddenly dominating the space in a way that made Ethan step back reflexively. Here's what's going to happen, Ethan. You're going to stop telling people I had a breakdown. You're going to stop trying to damage my professional reputation. And you're going to accept that you underestimated me so badly that you'll be studying the mistake for years. And if I don't, Ji-Hoon spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the particular quiet of someone who never needed to raise it. Then you'll discover that my wife's professional network is the least valuable thing she brought to this marriage. The most valuable thing is my attention. He paused. Which you now have. Completely. Something in Ethan's expression shifted. Recognition, maybe, or fear. He looked at Ji-Hoon more carefully now, reading details he'd missed. The deference of the waitstaff. The way other tables had quieted when Ji-Hoon stood. The quality of his stillness that suggested danger rather than calm. This isn't over, Ethan said, but it sounded like a line from a script he no longer believed in. It was over 6 weeks ago, Zuri said. You just didn't know it yet. She took Ji-Hoon's offered arm, and they walked away. Behind them, she heard the immediate rush of whispered conversation, phones emerging, the gossip spreading like fire through dry wood. They made it to the hallway before her hands started shaking. Ji-Hoon noticed immediately. Guided her into an empty service corridor, away from cameras and witnesses.
Didn't speak.
Just stood there while she breathed through the adrenaline crash, while the performance drained away and left her raw. I'm fine, she said finally. You're not. But you will be. He looked at me like I was nothing. Like her voice caught. Like everything I built, everything I am, was just a resource to be harvested. I know. Ji-Hoon's hand came up, hesitated, then settled on her shoulder. The touch was careful, grounding. But he's wrong. And everyone in that room now knows he's wrong. Zuri looked up at him. His face was closer than she'd expected, close enough that she could see the dark of his eyes, the way he was watching her with something that looked almost like concern. Why do you care? She asked. This is just a contract. You don't owe me. You're my wife. He said it simply, as if that explained everything. Even an arrangement, that means something. He hurt you. That makes it my business. Something in Zuri's chest shifted. Not the crack from the elevator 6 weeks ago. Something different. Something that felt like a door opening when she hadn't known it was closed. Thank you, she whispered. Ji-Hoon's hand on her shoulder tightened briefly, then released. We should go. The driver is waiting. But before they left, he did something unexpected. Shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, even though the building wasn't cold. The gesture was old-fashioned, protective, completely unnecessary. And Zuri wore it all the way home, breathing in cedar and something else, feeling the weight of it like armor. She didn't know Ji-Hoon left the gala venue and made 3 phone calls. Didn't know he spent the next 5 days having Ethan Blake investigated with the kind of thoroughness usually reserved for national security threats. Didn't know what he learned, or what he planned to do with the information. She just noticed that Ji-Hoon was gone more than usual, that when he came home, he seemed preoccupied, that he spent long hours in his study with the door closed, speaking in low Korean to people whose names she still didn't know. A week after the gala, she found him on the terrace at 2 in the morning, city lights spread below, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Can't sleep? She asked. He glanced at her. Work. At 2 a.m.? My work doesn't keep office hours. Zuri settled into the chair beside him, pulling her robe tighter against the spring night air. They sat in silence for a while, the comfortable kind they developed through weeks of proximity. He's still talking, she said finally.
Ethan.
My assistant heard, through her network. He's telling people I fabricated the fraud allegations, that I'm unstable. I know. You know. I'm handling it. Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. Handling it how? Ji-Hoon took a slow sip of whiskey. Do you want details or results? I want to know if you're doing something that will come back on you. It won't. Ji-Hoon. Zuri. He turned to face her fully now. You asked me once what my business is. I didn't answer because the less you know, the safer you are. But I will tell you this. I am very good at making problems disappear. And Ethan Blake is a problem. I don't want you to, she stopped. Wasn't sure how to finish. Didn't want him to what? Risk himself? Commit crimes on her behalf? Care enough to do either? You don't want me to what? Ji-Hoon's voice was quiet. I don't want you to do something you can't undo because of a contract marriage that has an expiration date. He was silent for a long moment. Then, is that what you think this is? Still. Isn't it? I don't know anymore. He set his glass down with precision. I thought I was offering you a transaction. Protection and legitimacy in exchange for appearances and discretion.
Clean.
Simple. Limited. And now I come home and notice when you haven't eaten. I make sure the coffee is ready at midnight because I know you'll need it. I find myself thinking about your safety when I should be thinking about business. He paused. I've spent weeks investigating a man who humiliated you, not because it serves the arrangement, but because the thought of him damaging you makes me want to.
He stopped.
Didn't finish. But Zuri heard it anyway, the shape of violence he'd contained. What did you find? She asked quietly. Everything. Financial fraud across 3 countries. Tax evasion. Bribery. A pattern of targeting successful women for exploitation that goes back 7 years. His voice was very calm, the kind of calm that lived on the other side of fury. You weren't the first. Just the first who walked away before he could execute the plan. Zuri's breath caught. 7 years. 3 women before you. All of them damaged professionally. All of them too ashamed to pursue legal action because he'd positioned the relationships to make them look complicit in his schemes. Ji-Hoon's hands were steady on his glass, but she noticed the tension in his shoulders. He's been doing this as a business model, and no one stopped him. Until now. Until now. She should ask what he was planning. Should tell him not to do anything illegal, anything that could compromise either of them. Should remember that this was a contract with an ending and that his protection wasn't supposed to extend beyond the terms they'd agreed to. Instead, she asked, when? Tomorrow. Everything goes into motion tomorrow. He looked at her. Are you going to ask me not to?
No.
Why not? Because he hurt other women. Because he was going to hurt me. Because she met his eyes. Because I trust you to do this right. Something shifted in Ji-Hoon's expression. Not quite a smile. Something deeper. You trust me. Is that surprising?
Yes.
You married me specifically because you'd never trust anyone again. I married you because I thought I wouldn't have to trust you. That a contract was safer than faith. Zuri pulled her robe tighter, suddenly aware of how much she was admitting. But you've kept every promise, every boundary, every term, and then you went beyond them. Made dinner when I forgot to eat. Stood beside me at that gala. Spent a week investigating someone who hurt me even though it serves no purpose in our arrangement. It serves a purpose, Ji-Hoon said quietly. What purpose? He stood, moved to the terrace railing, looked out at Seoul. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. The purpose of making sure you're safe. The purpose of removing threats to things he stopped. Started again. I told you I wouldn't fall in love with you. That love was a liability I'd avoided for 15 years. Zuri's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. And I think I was wrong. He turned to face her. I don't know if what I feel is love. I have no reference point. But I know that your safety matters more than logic. That your happiness affects mine. That the thought of you leaving in 12 months makes me want to renegotiate the contract. The city noise filtered up. Cars, voices, the eternal hum of soul at night. Zuri stood slowly, moved to stand beside him at the railing. Ji-Hoon, she said carefully. We agreed. I know what we agreed. And if you want to hold me to those terms, I will. 18 months, then you're free. No obligations, no expectations. His jaw tightened. But I'm telling you now, before tomorrow happens, that my motivation isn't contractual anymore. I'm doing this because he hurt you. And that matters to me in ways it shouldn't. Zuri looked at his profile, the clean lines of it, the tension he held like a shield, the unexpected vulnerability of this admission. She thought about 6 weeks of proximity, of learning his habits and him learning hers, of the way protection had evolved into care and care had evolved into something neither of them had named. What happens tomorrow? She asked. Justice. The legal kind. Every piece of evidence I've gathered goes to the appropriate authorities, Korean, American, British. Tax agencies, regulatory bodies, the women he victimized. By tomorrow night, Ethan Blake will be facing charges in 3 countries. His assets will be frozen. His reputation will be destroyed. And he'll know it came from you. He'll suspect. He won't be able to prove it. And by the time he tries, he'll have much bigger problems. Zuri turned to face him fully. This is who you are. This is what you do. Yes. And you're doing it for me. Yes. She should be afraid. Should recognize this for what it was. A demonstration of power, a glimpse into the machinery she'd agreed not to examine. Should remember that men who could destroy others with phone calls and evidence were men who could destroy her just as easily. But all she felt was seen, protected, valued in a way that had nothing to do with utility. Ji-Hoon, she said quietly. I think I'm falling in love with you too. His breath caught. For a long moment, he just looked at her, something raw and unguarded crossing his face. Then, you don't have to say that. The contract doesn't require. I'm not saying it because of the contract. I'm saying it because it's true. She moved closer, close enough to see the exact color of his eyes in the ambient light. I didn't want this. Didn't plan for it. But proximity did something neither of us expected. You became someone I trust. Someone I care about. Someone whose absence I notice more than their presence. Zuri. Her name in his mouth sounded like something precious. I don't know what this means for the arrangement, she continued. Maybe it complicates everything. Maybe it's a terrible idea. But I'm tired of pretending I don't feel it. Tired of performing distance when what I want is. She didn't finish.
Didn't need to.
Because Ji-Hoon closed the space between them with 2 steps, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with everything she knew about what those hands could do. Can I kiss you? He asked, and the question, the fact that he asked, made something in her chest break open completely. Yes. He kissed her like she was rare and breakable and entirely necessary. His mouth was warm, his touch careful, the whole moment carrying the weight of 6 weeks of restraint finally released. Zuri's hands found his shirt, gripped fabric, pulled him closer as the kiss deepened into something that felt like falling and flying simultaneously. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ji-Hoon rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he whispered. I know. The contract. We'll figure it out. But first, she pulled back enough to meet his eyes. First you do what you need to do tomorrow. And then we talk about what comes after. What comes after the arrangement ends, or what comes after tomorrow. Both. Ji-Hoon's thumb traced her cheekbone. I want you to stay. After the 18 months. Not because of the contract. Because of this. Ask me again in 12 months, Zuri said. When we're both sure this isn't just proximity and protection masquerading as love. And if I'm sure now, then you'll be sure in 12 months, too. She kissed him again, softer this time. I'm not going anywhere, Ji-Hoon. But I want us both to choose this clearly. Not because we needed each other once, but because we want each other permanently. He nodded slowly, then smiled, an actual smile, rare and genuine and devastating. You're patient for someone who just admitted to falling in love. I'm practical. I learned it from you. They stood on the terrace until sunrise, talking in fragments, kissing in the spaces between words, figuring out what it meant to renegotiate an arrangement into something real. And when the city woke below them, when the first light touched the buildings and turned glass to gold, Zuri felt something she hadn't felt in months.
Hope.
Clean and uncomplicated and entirely hers. Ethan Blake's world ended on a Tuesday. It started with a phone call from his lawyer at 6 a.m. By 7, his bank accounts were frozen. By 8, news outlets in 3 countries were running stories about financial fraud, tax evasion, and a pattern of targeting women for exploitation that read like a criminal enterprise. By 9, the first lawsuit had been filed. By noon, his company had fired him. By evening, he was under investigation by multiple international agencies. Zuri learned about it through her assistant, who called at 10 with barely contained excitement. You need to see the news. Blake is being destroyed. Someone leaked everything, financials, communications, testimony from his previous victims. It's everywhere. Zuri pulled up the articles on her laptop, Ji-Hoon standing behind her chair, his hand resting on her shoulder. She read through them methodically, watching the architecture of Ethan's schemes laid bare for public consumption. Every manipulative tactic, every calculated cruelty, every woman he'd damaged. They're calling him a sociopath, her assistant said, saying he operated like a con artist. The legal community is in shock. Everyone who worked with him is scrambling to distance themselves. Good, Zuri said quietly. After she hung up, she sat in silence, processing. Ji-Hoon moved around to face her, crouched so they were eye level. How do you feel? He asked. Like justice happened. Like other women are safe now. Like she paused. Like the humiliation was his, not mine. That matters more than I expected. He'll go to prison. Multiple countries have grounds to prosecute. Even if he avoids jail in one jurisdiction, another will extradite him. Ji-Hoon's voice carried certainty. His life as he knew it is over. And no one will trace it back to you? No one who matters. And if they do, they'll understand why. He took her hands. In my world, protecting your wife isn't questioned. It's expected. Your wife. Not my wife for 12 more months. Just your wife, spoken like permanence. Zuri squeezed his hands. Thank you. For this. For all of it. You don't need to thank me for doing what should have been done years ago. They spent the day monitoring the fallout. More news broke hourly. Additional victims coming forward, financial institutions joining the investigations, business partners filing civil suits. Ethan's carefully constructed facade crumbled with the thoroughness of something that had always been hollow. That evening, Ji-Hoon got a call. He took it in his study, emerged 20 minutes later with an expression Zuri was learning to read as satisfaction. Blake tried to call in favors, he said. Old connections, people who owed him. Every single one refused. He's radioactive now. Untouchable. Because of what you did? Because of what he did. I just made sure people knew about it. Ji-Hoon settled beside her on the couch, his arm coming around her shoulders in a gesture that had become natural over the past weeks. Justice isn't always legal. Sometimes it's social. Professional. The complete destruction of someone's ability to harm others. You're good at this, Zuri observed. I've had practice. She turned to look at him. Should I be worried about what that means?
Probably.
But not tonight. He kissed her temple. Tonight we acknowledge that a bad man faced consequences. And we move forward. Moving forward meant something different now. Meant navigating what they'd become underneath the contract. Meant figuring out how to be partners instead of players in an arrangement. 3 months passed. Spring turned to summer, Seoul's heat settling over the city like a blanket. Zuri's career stabilized and then flourished. Clients who'd been quietly skeptical about her sudden marriage became convinced she'd made a strategic choice, aligning herself with the Kang family's influence. She didn't correct them. Let them think what they wanted. The work spoke for itself. Ji-Hoon's family formally accepted her. Uncle Min-suk sought her advice on a business deal. Aunt Hae-won invited her to traditional tea ceremonies. Ji-young became something close to a friend, though their friendship consisted mainly of brutally honest observations about Seoul's social politics. But the most significant changes happened in the privacy of the penthouse. They stopped pretending the separate wings made sense. Zuri's clothes migrated to Ji-Hoon's closet. His books appeared on her nightstand. They fell asleep together most nights, his body curved around hers, his breath steady against her neck. They learned each other's damage. He told her about his father's death, the violence that had brought him into power too young, the years of becoming someone feared because fear was safer than love. She told him about her mother's illness, the scholarships that had built her career, the loneliness of being brilliant and foreign in rooms that didn't want her. They fought twice, once about her taking a case that would expose her to scrutiny from people Ji-Hoon considered dangerous, once about his refusal to tell her details about a business dealing that ended with him coming home bloodied. Both fights ended with apologies and boundary negotiations, and the understanding that loving someone didn't mean controlling them. 6 months into the arrangement, Ji-Hoon came home with a jewelry box. "What's this?" Zuri asked.
A gift.
"You don't have to wear it if you don't want to." He opened the box to reveal a ring. Not an engagement ring, not a wedding band, but something else entirely. A slim band of white gold with a single black diamond. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It's a choice." He took the ring out, held it carefully. "The contract expires in 12 months. And I've spent the last 6 months falling more in love with you than I thought possible. So I'm asking, not because of the arrangement, not because of appearances, but because I wanna. Will you stay? Will you make this real?" Zuri looked at the ring, then at him, then back. "You're proposing. I'm renegotiating. With honesty this time." His voice was steady, but she heard the vulnerability underneath. "I love you. I want you as my wife not for 18 months, but permanently. I want to build something with you that isn't about protection or strategy or anything except this." He gestured between them. "Whatever this is."
Partnership.
"Love. Home." Her eyes burned. "Ji-Hoon. If you need more time, I'll wait. If you want to keep the original arrangement, I'll honor it. But I needed you to know where I stand." He paused. "I choose you. Completely." Zuri took the ring from his hand, studied it in the light. The black diamond caught reflections, held them, transformed them into something beautiful. Like pressure turning carbon into jewelry. Like pain turning into strength. "I have conditions," she said finally. "All right. I keep my career. My name. My autonomy. Marriage doesn't mean absorption." "Agreed. I never wanted to absorb you. I want you beside me, not behind me. And you tell me more about your business. Not everything. I understand there are things I can't know. But enough that I understand what I'm standing beside." Ji-Hoon's jaw tightened. "That's dangerous knowledge. I'm already dangerous. I'm your wife. That makes me a target whether I know details or not. I'd rather understand what I'm facing." He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly.
All right.
"I'll tell you more. Not names, not operations, but the truth about what I do. What my family is. And we build something that's ours. Not your family's legacy, Not my career, but something we create together. What did you have in mind? I don't know yet, but we figured out together. She slipped the ring onto her finger, right hand, not left, a deliberate choice. This isn't a yes to marriage. Not yet. This is a yes to renegotiating, to seeing if what we have can become what we want. Ji-Hoon's expression softened. How long do you need? Give me 6 more months. The full 18 we agreed to originally. Let me be sure this isn't just, she searched for words, trauma bonding, or proximity, or the intensity of a false start making us think we've found something real. And in 6 months. In 6 months, ask me again. And if I still feel what I feel now, I'll say yes. We'll destroy the contract. We'll make this real. She touched his face. But I need to be sure, Ji-Hoon.
For both of us.
Because if we do this, I want it to be forever. He turned his head, kissed her palm. 6 months. I can work with that. You're patient for someone who just proposed. I'm practical. I learned it from you. He echoed her words from months ago, and they both smiled. They didn't sleep together that night in the way she'd expected. Instead, they stayed up talking about the future they might build, about the compromises required for partnership, about the ways love could exist alongside danger and still be worth choosing. And when Zuri finally fell asleep in his arms, the black diamond ring on her finger catching moonlight, she dreamed not of contracts or arrangements, but of choice. The choice to stay. The choice to trust. The choice to love someone who'd offered her protection and received her heart instead. 12 months after meeting in a bar in Itaewon, Zuri Omari stood in a traditional hanok in Bukshin, wearing white, preparing to destroy a contract and make real vows. The original arrangement had expired 2 weeks ago. She'd let it lapse without fanfare, and Ji-Hoon had said nothing. Just waited. Patient as he'd promised. Then yesterday, she'd found him in his study and said, "Ask me." He'd looked up from his papers, understanding immediately. "Marry me. Not for appearances or protection or strategic advantage. Marry me because we built something worth keeping." Yes. That simply. That finally. The ceremony was small, just family and the few friends whose presence meant something. Zuri wore traditional Korean dress for the formal portion, then changed into white for the evening. Ji-Hoon wore a hanbok, then a tuxedo. They honored both sides of who they were, what they'd built together. When it came time for vows, they'd written their own. "I came to you broken," Zuri said, her voice steady despite the emotion. "And you offered me elevation and exits. You gave me choice when I thought I had none. You protected me without demanding weakness. You loved me without requiring performance." She paused. "I choose you. Not because I need you, but because I want you. Every day. For however long we get." Ji-Hoon's hands tightened on hers. "I thought I was offering you a contract, but you gave me something I didn't know I'd been missing.
Partnership. Trust.
The kind of love that makes you better instead of weaker." His voice was rough with feeling. "I choose you. Not for 18 months. Forever. However you'll have me." They exchanged rings, her original black diamond, his match. The officiant pronounced them married. They kissed to applause that felt earned. Later, during the reception, Ji-Young cornered Zuri. "I have to admit, I didn't think you'd last. Thought you'd run once you figured out what this family actually does." "I figured it out by month 2, Zuri said calmly. "I stayed anyway." "Why?" "Because he loves me for exactly who I am. And in return, I love him for exactly who he is. Including the dangerous parts." She paused. "Love isn't about changing people. It's about standing beside them and choosing partnership anyway." Ji-Young studied her. "You're good for him." Made him softer. "He was never hard. Just protected." Zuri smiled. "There's a difference." As night fell, Zuri and Ji-Hoon stood on the terrace of their penthouse, no longer his and hers, but theirs. The city spread below them like always, but everything felt different.
More solid.
More real. Any regrets? Ji-Hoon asked, his arm around her waist.
None.
You? Only that I didn't find you sooner. We found each other exactly when we needed to. Zuri turned in his arms, looked up at him. You gave me protection when I needed safety, partnership when I needed equality, and love when I was ready to receive it. And you gave me a reason to want more than survival. He kissed her softly. You made me believe in forever. They went inside eventually, to the life they'd built, to the partnership they'd chosen, to the love they'd earned through proximity and patience, and the slow work of learning each other's truths. The contract was destroyed, ceremonially burned, actually, in a private moment that made them both laugh. But the vows they'd made? Those were forever. Some loves are loud. Theirs was decided in silence. And when power finally chose devotion, it changed everything. Like,
share, comment,
and subscribe for more Afro, Soul Dark Romance Tale.
S.